Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Egan, the artistic director, producer of the Ohio Playwrights Conference, and welcome to Foundry Talks. And I'm very pleased to have with us today Mr. Sam Hunter. So, Sam, tell me what drew you to the Foundry Project, and then maybe we'll talk through the three phases and what you experienced in those phases. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This is such an atypical thing to do, workshopping this play online. But the play is also feels very atypical for me in many ways. So the last play that I had written before A Case for the Existence of God is a play called Greater Clements that I workshopped at Ohio 2 summers ago, summer of 2018, if I'm right. And I wrote this play about a year ago. So it was before Greater Clements was produced. Greater Clements got produced basically just before the pandemic. It closed in January. And I had been working on this play, and it was like a play that I started thinking, I'm not even sure this is a play. Like maybe this is just sort of like an exercise for me, or an exorcism for me, or something like that. I mean, I had recently become a dad, and my husband and I had gone through a very long, arduous adoption process, which, was one of the toughest things we've ever been through. I think probably the toughest thing we've ever been through as a couple, and certainly one of the toughest things that I've been through in my life. And so when I wrote this play that is not autobiographical and doesn't use any real parts of me or my husband's or my daughter's story, but it's kind of like auto fiction. It's getting at something that I experienced, but in a non-literal way. And so it was really, really hard to write. And when I was writing it, I really didn't know if it was like more therapy than anything else. And it also just feels very different than anything I've written. Greater Clements was very consciously was sort of written in the style of these big 3-act American dramas of the early 20th century. And it had a 2-level set and 7 characters and many scenes throughout 3 acts. Whereas this play the execution of it kind of couldn't be more different. It's only 2 people. There's really no set. It's set in a cubicle. And the 2 guys who are in the play don't even stand up from their office chairs until the very end. There are scene breaks, but they're, at least in my mind, they're instantaneous. There are no costume changes. There's no, I think it's, when I wrote it, I was sort of like, I want to write a play that you could do with pretty much full integrity in your kitchen if you really wanted to. Which is a very different endeavor than Greater Clements. And so when, Bob, you approached me about the Foundry Project, well, I mean, I should say originally we thought we were going to be workshopping this play normally. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, and when it became increasingly clear that we would not be able to gather by summer, then my initial thought was like, well, unfortunately, I guess they'll just have to cancel the conference. But so when Bob approached me with this idea of doing it online, I had a kind of a mix of feelings, because I've done a little bit of online theater, and I think I'm a little grumpy about it, just because I think for me personally, it reminds me of how much I want to actually go to a theater and see a play. But there's something about this play, I think, it would have been a little different trying to do Greater Clements online. I think that would have been a pretty hard experience, but there's something about this play. It was so simple and elegant and required almost no stage directions. I was sort of like, well, this is actually really well suited. And Bob, as you know, we talked about like, should I use this? This was the initial conversation, was like, should I use this time to create a Zoom version of this play? So, we could still do this play during lockdown. And I thought it through a lot, and I even had like a lot of, I had even started writing a few scenes that were sort of native to Zoom. And what I felt ultimately, as I started to do the work, was that I was kind of it wasn't like I was diluting the play, but I was making the play. I was kind of bending it as hard as I could to fit into Zoom. Uh, I think it would be one thing if I started writing a play being like, okay, I'm going to write a play for the medium of Zoom. That would be one thing. But since I didn't do that, it did kind of feel like I was muscling it a little bit. So we made the decision of, like let's just treat this like a workshop. Let's treat this like we're workshopping a play as we would normally if we could gather. And I think that was the right decision, because I think I just need to be sort of patient with with everything, and know that like there will be a time, even though it doesn't feel like it right now, there will be a time that we can gather again. There will be a time that we can go back in theaters, and I need to have my eyes on that rather than trying to write it for Zoom. So really, it was just. And what was nice about having only two characters and also directing it myself was that the people involved, it was very, very tight. So I just got to have like really long conversations with both of my actors. And the other great thing about it is the two actors that I work with are going to be the actors who eventually do the production at the Signature Theater where the play was commissioned. And normally I wouldn't be able to do that. Normally we'd be casting for the reading specifically. So it was so great to know that like I'm entering into this longer relationship with these two actors, neither of which I've ever worked with, but both of whom are incredible actors and bring so much to this play. So it really felt like this is sort of chapter one of a much longer book, that's going to continue. And it's just been so, during this weird time and this very stressful time, it's just been such a joy to be able to focus on it and really just do a deep dive with these actors and my dramaturg, my husband, John. Yeah, it's been really great. I think the play has taken a really big step forward, both in the text, but also just in my relationship with these actors.
Who are the two actors that are in it?
So it's Will Brill and Kyle Beltran.
Wow. So tell me what was the phase one? You read the play, and there we have a community of I think about 36 people, 8 playwrights, directors, dramaturgs, and staff. What was phase one like for you when you just hearing the play and getting some feedback?
It was so much better than, I mean, I think I can say this almost at every aspect of the Foundry. It's like it was so much fuller than I expected it to be. And the sort of thing I didn't expect to happen was, normally when we do the pre-conference, we're sitting around the library and we read the scripts to one another and we give feedback kind of in that moment. And you might talk to people by the pool or over food or something, but usually those conversations are much more convivial and just, having a good time. But the way that this worked was, so we did have the initial reading and then everybody on Zoom gave their thoughts, but and there were some great thoughts that I got in that session, but the really deep dives that I did were after that, where people would email me or call me or FaceTime with me, and I could have these really long extended conversations with people about the play that were really just focused on the play.
Wow.
And so like I kind of felt like I got even more feedback than normal, which was so great. So yeah, phase one was really full and complete, I thought.
And then after phase one and getting the feedback from the community and John and your actors, what did you start to address in the play? Because phase two was bringing back the new work.
So for phase two, I actually made the decision not to read the entire play over again. We only read like the second half because I just kind of felt like, well, we read the entire thing once. So rather than sort of have everybody sit through it again, like, let me just be a bit more laser-like focused in what I'm actually looking at. So I think like the first part of that was kind of what I normally do after I get feedback is I go to John, who, my husband and my dramaturg, and we just have very long conversations about what the notes are, if there's like a note behind the note ever, if there's if there's something we didn't really understand or we don't really agree with, like, well, what's like really triggering that reaction, and investigating that. And then from then I think I just sort of had a list of things I wanted to focus on. And then I had separate long conversations with both Will and Kyle, because it's such a deeply, deeply focused character-centered play. Really, like, those conversations about like how they tracked through the play and what their journeys were just really invaluable. So yeah, so I mean, it was a lot. We didn't do like a ton of proper like rehearsal. It was mostly just like, I mean, we did like do various readings and things, and we'd hop on Zoom and like read through some things or talk through some things, but really like the lion's share of the work was in those individual conversations.
And then once you had done phase two and you had heard the back end of the play, second half of the play, where you had done work, and then you had an opportunity in phase three or four, phase three and four, is to go into rehearsal and then put it all together where you are at this moment with the play for your workshop reading. So what was that like, Sam?
I think the phase that part of it, which was basically like last month, I guess, or maybe a little bit longer than that, I had done a lot of the rewriting that I wanted to do, and though I continued making changes, a lot of that work was really just focused on I want to say the performances, but it really wasn't that. It was more the characters and like and how these guys felt their way through the play. Like conversations about like, well, what happened right before this scene? So what is it like? How does that completely affect the way that you're playing, the end of the scene based on like how you're walking into it?
Right.
So yeah, it was mostly that stuff, and then like I said, getting back on Zoom and putting it back together and talking about the shape of it.
And it must have been gratifying to just hear it all in one go, right?
Yeah. Well, and that was a nice thing, is I actually didn't really want to put it all together until we did the recording for the final presentation, and I'm glad, because it was just so nice to, after this process that's usually 2 weeks and very intense, been spread out over several weeks, to be able then finally to sort of like put it back together for the first time since we read it to everybody in that first Zoom reading a couple of months ago.
Final question, Sam, which is a two-parter. In this time of distancing and social isolation, the importance of enterprises like this that creates community for writers whose, your work is pretty solitary, generally speaking, but it compounded now. And two, are there any special qualities to the developmental world at Ojai that keeps you coming back? Sam has been with us 3 or 4 times. Actually, Sam and I had a conversation one summer where Sam said, I don't have a play. I just want to come back. I'll be a dramaturg or do anything you want. So why don't you take both parts of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is for theater artists right now, there is an impulse toward despair. And it's one that I feel, and it's one that is rooted in something really real. Our entire art form is predicated on our ability to gather, and not only gather, but be in groups, in real groups. You know what I mean? Like, an audience is a kind of a single organism, that's composed of many, many people. And I don't know what that organism is when we all have to be 6 feet apart or in plastic bubbles or whatever it is. There's a lot of, I had this conversation with my brother last night, who's he's a dean of the library at the University of Idaho, and he was talking about what they're doing and to be able to continue higher education and what this means for the future of higher education. And it just occurred to me that like so many industries can make accommodations to accomplish the thing. They can they can make a bunch of adjustments in order to not fully do whatever it is they're doing, but have a version of the thing they're doing. And even though we're doing a lot of like online theater, this online theater is a very different thing than theater. So the thing we do is basically just entirely gone. And so I think they're like, and once that sort of settles into my bones, that reality, I do feel like a little bit of despair. But what this has done, and what things like this I think continue to do, are remind me that the community is still there, and the community is kind of unchanged, you know. And if anything, like maybe this is just going to make everybody hungrier to get back in and do more meaningful work, and lift up, you know, voices that should be lifted up. So that's where I don't despair. That, you know, and I think like this conference has reminded me that I don't need to only live in that despair, which is really great. Like, I don't know of any other place where I feel like I could go to the artistic director and be like, can I just come and be a dramaturg? You know what I mean? Like, because it does have this like very familial atmosphere. You know, it was like really moving when we all got on Zoom that first day, and it was like, whoa, hi, everybody. You know, it was like all these faces and all these people. And so that's what feels really unique, you know. Like it's like one of my longest, if not the longest, artistic relationship I've ever had with a company. You know, I started coming to OI in 2009.
Right.
You know?
And we love having you. And
I love being there.
And now a new role. You've been a playwright. You want to come back, and a dramaturg, because you've been great dramaturgic with people, and now a director. So you can wear all three hats next time. You know, we said at the end of your workshop reading, you mentioned the word despair, and Chris Breyer had mentioned the feeling of that in the play. And I think what makes you valuable in this particular time, Sam, because as I always say to you, the very precise quotidian worlds you create speak about the nation, I feel, in some profound way. And I think there's a very important conversation that takes place in the course of the play between despair and hope, impulses towards despair and hope. And like some of the great plays that I admire, Beckett for one, that in the face of that existential darkness, your characters at the end are capable of fighting to the position of saying, we think it's going to be okay.
Yeah, hard one.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that, Sam, and I appreciate, because that's where we are right now. And Sam has moved up to the Berkshires where I am right now, and we'll be spending a lot of time together with Francis and John. So thank you so much, Sam, for your continued relationship with us, and keep writing, because we need you and we need to hear your words. Thank you.
Thank you so much.